Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation on NFTs and IP. It's a fascinating area of the law. We're going to cover a lot of topics today, and hopefully we'll provide some clarity on many of the misconceptions that are out there on these topics. Briefly about my background. So I'm a blockchain and fintech team leader at Shepherd Mullen. I also head up our games team and do a lot of work in interactive entertainment. And through this, have gotten very involved with NFTs. My initial introduction into the crypto and blockchain realm was back in 2012. One of my clients became general counsel of the Bitcoin Foundation, got me involved in this whole world. And for the last 10 years, I've been deeply immersed and having a great time practicing law in this fascinating and evolving area. So first, before we get into some of the legal issues, I think it's important to cover some of the basics. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about blockchain technology. There's a lot of ways you hear people describe things with a lot of adjectives, but not a lot of clarity as to what those terms mean. And so I'm going to try to break this down for you. So basically, when we think about a blockchain, it's a form of what's referred to as a distributed ledger technology. When you think about ledgers, you can think about these old leather-bound books that had pages with lines on them. And on each line of the page, there'd be transaction information for a particular transaction. It might be the name of the purchaser, what they bought, the date, the price, or whatever other information. And when the page got filled, you would turn to the next page of the ledger and you would repeat the process. Blockchain is somewhat like that, but instead of pages, there's blocks, as we'll see. So in some respects, a distributed ledger technology is like a database because it stores transaction information, but it's different in a number of key ways, which we'll take a look at. One of the key differences is that with blockchain technology, typically the transactions are stored not in one place, like a single ledger, but rather they're stored on multiple what's referred to as nodes. And nodes are just different computers in the network that run whatever the blockchain protocol is for the particular blockchain of interest. And so one of the differences is that by having these multiple nodes, each maintain a current copy of the blockchain. In this way, it's said that the blockchain is distributed. Right? And by distributed here, we mean that there's multiple copies and that they're under control of different entities. Typically, the nodes are run by different entities. The other thing then is that, so anytime there's a change in the blockchain, that change is broadcast to all of the nodes. And typically, depending on the blockchain protocol, and there's many different ones, there must be a validation of any proposed change by a certain number of the nodes. So the next thing we want to talk about is blocks. So I mentioned that as opposed to pages, blockchains use blocks, and mentioned that blocks are analogous to pages. So what happens is there's a group of transactions that are stored in a block, just like there's a group of transactions on a page. But what's different with blockchain technology is that the blocks are chained together. And how does that happen? The way the blocks are chained together is that once block one is full with the transaction data that it pertains to, the blockchain will create what's called a hash value. And a hash is really there's an algorithm that's run on the contents of block one, and it will generate a unique alphanumeric string of characters that is what the hash value is. And that hash value is a kind of an encoded representation of what the content is. And that hash value for block one actually gets written into the header of block two. So the way these blocks are chained together is the hash of block one written to block two. Why is this important and what does it do? By doing this, if anyone ever goes back and tries to change any of the content in block one will now have a new hash value. And so it will not match the hash value that was written to block two. And so this is one of the ways in which you can detect or prevent fraud from happening or anyone changing the data on a blockchain. And so this concept is referred to as immutability. The concept of immutability is that the data cannot be validly changed or it will be detected. And this problem gets worse because, as you can see, as you start writing the hash value of block 2 to block 3, and so on, the more blocks there are, the more someone would have to go back and change each and every block of the chain in order to make a change. And on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, each copy of the blockchain is stored on multiple nodes. So even if someone changed all the blocks on their node, it wouldn't match the blocks on someone else's node, and those chains and that whole blockchain would be rejected. So there's a lot of built-in mechanisms that provide safety and security with respect to the data that's stored on a blockchain.